In this exercise, we're going to be taking a look at working drawings, and I'm going to be using exercise 12-1 to explain kind of the process for this working drawing. There are a lot of different types of working drawings, but basically the premise is going to be an assembly view of some sort and detail views for all non-standard parts. So in the example of 12-1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the example using an exploded isometric view for the assembly, and then here we can see that I've got a top and front for the two non-standard parts in exercise 12-1. So the goal is to create a drawing that is going to utilize one sheet for the assembly view and a list of materials, and then another view or another sheet for the non-standard views. Now, these parts aren't very big, so there's a chance that I may be able to fit all of this on a single A-size drawing, and if I can, that's what I'm going to do, but that's something that we'll work with as we get into this. So here you can see that I've got the isometric views for all of these parts already completed and exploded. The only thing that I did in here is I did put in a trace line, which is just lines from the centers going all the way down just to show that those parts connect, and I did put those lines on the center line layer. On this particular view, I put in the depth of the hole as a hidden line just to show that it does not go all the way through and that it actually does have a bottom. That hole is only 25 deep, so that's what I've got in here represented. So to begin with my working drawing, I'm going to switch over to my layout tab where my border exists, and I'm going to use the MV command like normal to create a viewport. But this time I'm not going to create a very big viewport because I've got to locate some different things inside the viewport. So I'm only going to draw it kind of taking up about half of the screen right here. And we can see that it brings in everything from the model space, and I don't want everything in this view. I only want my assembly view. So if I look down here when I click on the viewport, first of all, let me change that to the viewport layer. When I look down here, it's at a scale of 0.32. I'm going to change that to a scale of 1 to 2 or 50%. And then once I'm in this viewport, I can double click inside of it to activate the model space, and I can pan this thing over so that this is in the view like I want it to be. Once I have this in the view like I want it to be, I can double click outside the viewport, and then I'm going to shrink it down so that it only contains this. Now, because I have this set up at a certain scale and there's a lot of other stuff in here, what I want to do is I actually want to lock this particular viewport. So when I'm clicked on it, down here again I've got my scale and everything, but then I've got this icon right here, the lock icon. And I absolutely want to click on that lock icon. That way if I double click inside of here, I can't accidentally pan it or zoom it around anymore. So there's no chance that the information here is going to be moving in any way, shape, or form. So at this point, I want to insert a table so that I can create my list of materials. So I'm going to click on the table button, and this is going to ask me what I want. So I'm going to use a standard style for the table. I'm going to start from empty. I want to have, we're going to go with 4 columns because I want an item ID, a quantity, a name, and a material. So we've got 4 columns. And the number of data rows that I have, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 different parts for this particular assembly. So I want to use a minimum of 4 data rows. I like to always have an extra row at the end or 2. So I'm going to go ahead and say 6 rows. For the first row, I want a title. For the second row, I want the headers. All other rows are going to be data. So I can go ahead and say okay to this. Now, when I bring this in, you can see that it's quite large, and I don't need it to be that big, but I'm just going to locate it right up here with a left click, and now I can go ahead and fill in the information. So this first line, I'm just going to put list of material. We'll go with item, QTY for quantity, name, and MATL for material. Now, before I go any further, I want to shrink this down a little bit because this is kind of big. So we can shrink the item number down quite a bit because it's only going to be items 1 through 4. The quantity is going to be the same way. It's something that can be significantly shorter because it's only going to have a number in there. And then the name, I can leave the name as is, or I can shrink it down a little bit, but I think I'm just going to shrink down the material a little bit because all of the materials for everything in here is going to be SA 1020 steel. So with that in mind, I'm just going to come in here and put in SAE 1020. And then I'm actually going to copy that text using copy and paste. So I'm going to close that to say I don't need to see that error message. And then I am going to paste this into each of the rest of the cells because it's the same in each. So then I can come over here and type in the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 4. The quantity for item number 1, which I'm going to use as the threaded block, is going to be 1. The quantity for the link bar is going to be 2. The quantity for the threaded hex head screw is going to be 1. And the quantity for the washer is going to be 3. So now I can put in those objects. So we'll put in here threaded block. And we can see that that automatically adjusts itself to 2 lines, and that's okay for what we're doing in here. For part number 2, this was called the link bar. Part number 3, this is going to be my M10 by however long hex head screw. Now the reason I put in the question marks is because part C tells you to calculate the length of the M10 hex head screw. So when you guys do the calculations for how long you think that hex head screw should be, you can put in that distance right here where I have those question marks. And then the last thing is going to be the 12 by 18 by 3 washers. So there we have our list of material, and here we have all of our parts. Now, this list of material doesn't really do me any good unless I correlate it to this in some way. So let me move this over so that I have enough room to label everything over here. And I'm going to go to the LE command, which is the leader command that I've been using, and I want to go to the settings. So for my annotation type, I'm just going to go ahead and use the M text. Line leader and arrow, that's all going to be the same. Attachment is going to be the same, and then we can go ahead and label our parts. So this one right here is going to be part 1. This right here will be part 2. This right here is going to be part 3. And then the washer will be part 4. Now, it's not important to label the washer in each location unless they're a different size. So if everything that you're dealing with is the same size, you can just go ahead and label it all in the same view. Now, with that being said, I don't have very much room left on this sheet, but because I only have 2 non-standard parts and they're both fairly simple, I should be able to get the rest of the information that I need from the drawing on this particular sheet. So I'm going to go to MV, and I'm going to make my viewport. Double click inside the viewport, kind of zoom in on the part that I want. I'm going to go ahead and make this half scale as well. Double click back outside the viewport, and then we'll just shrink that down a little bit. And I do want to make sure that I lock this one as well. And then I'll move this viewport over just a little bit so that everything lines up. Now, I do need to go in here and make some changes. This really should be on a different layer. This should not be on the hidden layer, so I'm going to go ahead and change that to the text layer. All of my dimensions shouldn't be on the hidden layer. These should be on the dimension layer, so I can change those to dimension. If you forget to do this stuff ahead of time, it's not a big deal to go back and change it to where it should be. Just remember to go back and change it to where it should be. So now that I've got this view in here, I can go ahead and do my dimensioning on here. So the overall width of this piece, let me go ahead and switch to my dimension layer so that I don't have to keep changing it. So we'll dimension this. I want to do the width, which is 40. I want to do the overall depth. I want to do the height of this hole, which is going to be the 15. And the distance of the hole in that direction, which is going to be 20. Now I can come down here and put in the overall height of the object, and then I can use the leader command to label the hole. So we'll bring this down here, and we will call this M10 by 25 deep, which is how it's called out in the book. So with this information, I now have everything that I need to actually recreate this block, so I can move on to the next part that I have. So again, I'm going to go to MV and draw my corner, and in this case I'm going to double click in here and zoom in on that link bar, and we're going to change that to 1/2 inch scale as well. Double click outside the viewport and then just shrink the viewport down so that the whole object fits inside of here. And now I can move this to where it looks a little bit better and change this to the viewport layer. And then make sure that that viewport gets locked as well. At this point, I can go ahead and dimension everything that I have on here. So we will dimension from the center to the center here, which is going to be 40. I want to do a radial dimension on the outside of here, which is going to be the 12. That gives me the overall size of the actual link bar and all of the information that I need to actually draw that. And then for the 2 holes, I have a diameter 12 2 places, so we'll go to my leader. We'll bring this off of here. And I will put in the % C12 and then put 2 holes. So that gives me the diameter 12 2 holes, and I'm going to just drag this out so that it all fits on a single line. And the last thing that I want to do is I want to add one more dimension in here to cover the overall thickness of this plate, which is going to be 5. So in this case, we can see here's my assembly view that's exploded. It's got the trace line that goes down through the center to let people know, or whoever's assembling it, know that everything is lined up on the centers. The hex head bolt and the washers are standard components. That's something that somebody can find a part number for. They can go to a website, they can order those pieces. The link bar and the threaded block are the 2 parts of this assembly that are non-standard. So those are the ones that I needed to include the detail views for. If I was going to create a second sheet, meaning I was going to put these 2 views on a separate sheet or on a separate layout tab, I would want to do a little bit of work down here. And I just want to explain this at the end of this video so that everybody knows what's going on. Layout 2, I want to delete because it does not actually have my template on it. So layout 1, at this point, I would want to rename sheet 1. And then to get and make sure that I have my template on any subsequent sheets, if I right click on sheet 1 and go to move or copy, create a copy and move to end and say OK, that gives me sheet 1 with parentheses 2. So I would just right click on that and go to rename and change that to sheet 2. Now what that would do once I get over here is that allows me to go ahead and remove everything that's here, and I still have my border, I still have all my layers, and I could go ahead and put in any views that I have on this sheet. If I needed another sheet, I could right click down here again, move or copy, create a copy, move to end, hit OK. And then I could rename this to sheet 3. So no matter how many sheets you have in your drawing, you can just continue to add the sheets down here using that move or copy. That way it's always taking your border with you, and you don't have to copy and paste it to a different view or do anything else like that. So once you already have your name, the date, and the assignment in place, moving or copying means that it's just going to be in the same place in all instances, and then you can just filter back and forth amongst your sheets by clicking on the tabs down here at the bottom of the screen. But that's going to wrap up exercise 12-1. And again, this is one aspect of a working drawing where you have an assembly view, a list of material, and then all of the detail views that make up that particular assembly.